Hello, everyone. Santir here, and today I want to talk about a phrase, concept, I don't know exactly what you want to call it, basically an argument that I very much so dislike. It's think of the children. There are, of course, times where it's highly appropriate to think of the children. For example, in education, which is probably why we don't often use the phrase then, because it makes sense, like that's kind of the default mode. There are other things like parks, potentially. There might be a good argument for, like, think of the children, like, what do they need to make this park good for children to play in or whatever. But often I feel like this phrase gets thrown around as just a really poor emotional appeal type argument with no sound logical reasoning or basis for why it should be included. There's a lot of times where, and this is particularly why I dislike the phrase, because people use think of the children in the sense of, I want to protect my children from a thing, and it's a thing that bothers me that probably won't actually affect children. It's the weirdest thing. There's a lot of times where also the phrase is sort of strange in that if we need to think of the children here, we should probably be thinking of everyone here, not just the children. For example, things with safety. Sometimes you need extra safety measures for children specifically, but for example, speed limits and things like that. It's like, well, yes, but really we shouldn't be thinking about the children's safety. We should be thinking about everyone's safety. Why are the children more important than everyone else? You know, they're human beings, just as everyone else is a human being. And it feels like it's an emotional appeal to try to, I don't know, connect with people somehow. Maybe it's just an argument that doesn't work well for who I am, or that sort of thing. I also usually think of the being used for children who are like prepubescent, under 10, that sort of thing. And there's a lot of really odd applications for it. For example, nudity, usually there's a push away from that for I think of the children, but like it so often seems to make no sense, where children aren't even sexual beings. They're not witnessing things in the same way that an adult does. And I think that's part of where I say it has no logical backing, right? Where what's the right word for this? The approach is looking at it from an adult point of view and not taking into account the child's point of view with things, where there's can be a push for censorship in a way where it's censoring things from an adult perspective in a way that doesn't actually protect children, because the children don't need to be... It's this weird sort of side thing. I mean, you can see it with like language usage, like what words do people use? Of like, use clean language around children. Why? Because that's the social standards. Really, what the think of the children argument, the aspects of it that I strongly dislike are usually either social standards of saying this thing qualifies as an adult thing for arbitrary social reasons. So we need to think of the children and protect them from this adult thing that's not really a thing. Like, a child is not going to be scarred generally by seeing somebody naked or from hearing certain words, right? Those are things that we've decided are loaded from an adult context, where from a child's ignorant context, it doesn't make any sense. And then the other one that I dislike is where it's like, we have to extra protect children over everybody else. And it's like, I can appreciate why people have that sentiment. Like, children they're a precious thing and they are more vulnerable. But, like, unless that thing is especially dangerous to children, for example, think of the children when it comes to vaccines, because the children typically are a more vulnerable group to disease, because their immune systems are still building, or whatever specific reasons. I'm not actually knowledgeable on that 100%, but that's a good argument for think of the children. But something like drive slowly to protect children is kind of like, well, that should be drive slowly because speeding here is very dangerous to everyone. There can be some exceptions, like children playing in the streets type signs. That's kind of a side thing. That's kind of almost, let's not quite think of the children at all. So anyway, I just dislike this argument because think of the children is one of those, like, in what regard, right? Like, how are children relevant to what's going on here? What are you meaning by think of the children? What sort of protection, theoretically, like, it's always think of the children in a sense of, like, protecting the children from something, right? It's like, how are you actually protecting the children here? What are you protecting them from? Why do you need to protect them from it? Like, raw emotional appeal, it's usually, rarely, if ever, a useful or sound or good argument. So, but, people like their emotional arguments. They like their emotional appeals. And it just frustrates me. Frustrates me whenever I see some sort of sign that, or any sort of thing that's basically like, do this thing because the children. Think of the children. Ugh. Let's come up with better arguments. Unless, that's a legitimate reason to be concerned about children in a specific spot. Like, I don't know, making fences at cliffs that have, like, graded, like, a mesh inside so that way children can't climb through them or something. Times where you actually have to think of the children because adults are not generally going to do that, but children might. That sort of thing, that makes sense. But lots of other things don't. They're imposing an adult point of view on children that don't have that point of view, or any number of other random things. So, anyway, that's my rant. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up here before I say anything that starts circling on myself too much. So until next time, everyone, take care. Bye-bye.